The big story tonight. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole, and we are keeping our eye on the floods that have wreaked havoc across the country. At least 20 deaths have been recorded following the ongoing rains that have caused floods in some parts of the country. Thousands remain homeless as a result of the floods as authorities grapple with humanitarian challenges. In Nyando area of Kisumu County, for instance, about 1,600 families have been displaced. The county has spent about 73 million shillings in relocating residents. The floods have also ravaged the northeastern part of Kenya. Areas that are usually known for drought like Garissa and Wajir now choking in floodwaters. But how best can the rainwater be utilized to ensure sustainability in water supply in the affected regions and the rest of the country? Why, for instance, do Nairobi residents face water rationing even now, when there is rainwater just about everywhere? This is our focus on the big story tonight, and we welcome you to join the conversation. As always, tweet me at Yvonne Okwara at KTN News. The hashtag is the big story. That's how I will be tracking your feedback. So let's take a look at the guests that we have tonight. We have a full house on the show this evening. We have Ali Bashir, who's going to be representing the nomadic community, and he's our Wajir resident. We will be speaking to him, as well as Venant Ndigila, who is the Emergency Operations Manager at the Kenya Red Cross. Henry Ochieng is the CEO of the Kenya Alliance Residents Association. And most importantly, Dr. Richard Mwita, who's the Assistant Director of the Kenya Meteorological Department. In addition to them, we've got our lead reporter on the show, that is Sophia Wanuna, who joins us now to just give us an overview of what's been happening with this situation across the country. Sophia?
Good evening, Yvonne. As you mentioned at the beginning there of the show tonight, indeed unfortunate scenes we've witnessed not only here in Nairobi but around the country as the the heavy downpour has been witnessed. That was predicted by the weatherman. In fact, accurate forecast of when we'd expect the rains. They showed up in those particular instances as had been predicted. But it appears not much was done in as far as averting the kind of scenarios that we have seen so far. And the effects of these rains, 20 lives lost, at least by last month. 3 of those, Yvonne, children from Kilifi County, swept away as they made their way to school. And even now, as we stand outside, it's actually threatening to start pouring. But Yvonne, other than the deaths occasioned by the rains, the people who have been displaced because of their homes being swept away, structures brought down, we have seen havoc on our roads. You've seen the destruction of infrastructure, pothole becoming little craters, if you like, impassable roads in some instances, vehicles being submerged. Even in some areas, we've seen roads turning out to look like lakes or dams because of the scenarios that we've witnessed. And yet, Yvonne, this is not the first time we are seeing this. One, it was focused by the weatherman, the meteorological department, talking about it just weeks and even months before this happened. But also we've seen this kind of scenarios, pictures and events play out each and every year. So it's in essence a perennial problem. And one of the key issues underlying this is a soft underbelly as far as the Kenyan, and more specifically to talk about Nairobi, the drainage system that has stayed the same for decades. No matter and despite of each administration coming into office, and now the county government's talking about upgrading it, we've not seen the effect of that upgrade or the import of it, because at the end of the day, you see the filth floating, you see the water piling up. Just 5 minutes of heavy downpour and already it's a huge mess getting into the homes. And for here in the capital, where you have 60% of the residents leaving in the slums, already dealing with precarious situations there, this kind of flooding only goes to worsen their living conditions and other parts of the country as well. So drainage is one of the biggest problems, and despite numerous promises and funds being put aside that they'll fix that, they will unblock the blocked drainage systems, we still see the same things happen every other time. In fact, just last month, City Hall announced 194 million shillings had been set apart to be able to fix the drainage system and avert cases of this kind of havoc we see occasioned by the flooding. But Yvonne, we will bet come next month, because the weatherman says these heavy rains will continue into May, we will continue seeing the same happen. Even during the Kidero administration, we kept hearing about funds being put aside to fix the problem. But this is a problem we've witnessed for decades, and it's a feeble drainage system, Yvonne, that has not been upgraded years on end. And the blame falls squarely onto the national government and the county government as well now in place. But also important to note, other than the drainage problem that has been witnessed, corruption and in the sense grabbing of land, some of which is pathways for this water, has also complicated the problem, so that waterways have now been blocked. You have developments on them, and so even when the systems are meant to work, this kind of scenarios are being in place, just complicating this particular issue. And on one hand, you have drainage problems. On the other, you have the flooding, of course, that's happening. But you mentioned the water rationing that's happening now. And this began, this round of water rationing, in January last year. And when the Nairobi Water and Storage Company announced the same, it was to go on until June. However, even now, water is still being rationed in several parts of this country, and yet this heavy downpour. The argument being made is that the water catchment area, Aberdares, is facing degradation, and Akaine Dam, and they talked about 31 cubic meters is what that dam is currently holding, hence this kind of damage we are seeing. But at the time last year when they announced the rationing, they said because of the long rains that would come then, they would ensure that the country and the county then would not be able to witness shortage going on. But it still continues, and in fact now what the national Nairobi Water and Storage Company is talking about is this water rationing going until 2026, Yvonne, when 2 more dams will be constructed, set up to be able to get more water in place. So an unfortunate situation being witnessed, Yvonne, and even despite the kind of funds we see set apart to fix this, there is not much in as far as the impact of the same, seeing the results, because we still see Kenyans taking to Twitter and venting frustration because of what is happening, no harvesting. So you have that ironic situation of water that's becoming a curse and a disaster for its citizenry, but on the other hand, those same people needing that water and that not being enough for the people. So Yvonne, it is to wait and see what it will take to fix this problem that continues to be a ticking time bomb.
Indeed, Sophia, it's that last statement that you made reminded me of a poem we used to recite in primary school, I believe. And it went a little like water, water everywhere, but not a drop to be found. That is the situation that persists in the country at the moment. Sophia Wanuna, our lead reporter on the show, thanks for that update and that overview of just what's been happening with the situation with the floods in the country. So let's just take you around the country and take a look at some of the major events, the havoc that's been caused by this, the deaths that have been occasioned by the floods that have ravaged various parts of the country, from urban areas within the cities, in fact, to areas like northeastern Kenya, including in Turkana as well. We're reporting a little earlier about what happened in Meru. I believe it was on News Center earlier today with Sharon Momanyi. So here is a look at those figures. Now, if we take a look at Nakuru County, and this was from March, we had a girl who drowned in Maimahiu. In Taita Taveta just a day later, 4 were killed in flood-related incidents. And moving to Kitui County, 5 people were swept away in a lorry on the same day. That's March 15th. Coming to this month at the start, that's on the 8th of April, now going to Kisumu County, floods swept away crops and animals. And then in Tana River County, seems like no county has been spared in the havoc that's been wreaked around the country. 5 children disappeared in floodwaters there. And then in Baringo County, 400 acres of maize and beans destroyed. So this is tearing up infrastructure, like Sophia said. Lives are lost, food is being lost. And remember, ironically, we came out from a severe drought just last year. In Samburu County, on the 11th of April, 3 people went missing in Asin village. In Narok, 10 vehicles were swept away at Suswa area. This is obviously an area that is known to be prone to floods. And in Mandera County, 6 people were injured in the flood. So these are just some of the various incidents that have been taking place across the country, and in many places tens of thousands have been displaced. For example, in Baringo County, 10,000 people displaced. Incidents where motorists are stuck in traffic jams for over 3 hours. Roads and bridges are washed away. So that is the situation that pertains in the country right now. So let's talk to my guests for a minute. I will come to you, Ali Bashir, in just a moment. But first, please allow me to get the latest forecast and to explain the phenomenon we're seeing now and what to expect in the coming days. And that I will get to you, Dr. Richard Mwita, who's the Assistant Director at the Met Department. So, Dr. Mwita, explain to us, what we're seeing now and what to expect in the coming days and weeks.
Thank you, Yvonne, for this opportunity. First and foremost, I would like to say that what we are experiencing is as we had predicted, and we had said that the rains will continue over the last couple of weeks. And now at the moment, we see that in the coming week, we are likely to see more rains. But as we can see at the moment, the rains have slightly subsided. If you can go by the floods that were reported in areas like Suswa and even in Nyando. But we expect in the coming days, in the western parts of the country, we expect that the rains will continue slightly lower, but as we head towards the end of the week, we expect the rains to slightly increase in the afternoon, particularly showers and thunderstorms. Again, in the areas that are in the central parts of the country, including Nairobi, we also expect that we'll have a pickup of the rains. They'll increase again towards as we approach the weekend. Again, over the coast from Thursday and perhaps around Saturday, we also expect to see more activities in terms of rain pickup at the coast.
Okay.
But, yes.
So why are we experiencing floods at this point? What's happening, with the weather phenomenon? Can we explain why this is happening? Well,
the seasonal rains are generally controlled by what we call the intertropical convergence zone. That is a zone that is actually regulated by the circulation of the globe. And at this moment now, it's over our region between now March and May. And it's associated with generally wet weather activities like the rains we are seeing. But the floods can be attributed to the continuous heavy rains, whereby you find that like in the last 7 days, for example, you find some areas that have reported over 100 millimeters of rainfall in the last maybe 5 or so days. That's quite a huge amount of water. And therefore, if the drainage is not that good, then you're likely to see these floods, and they'll affect people who live there or any other kind of infrastructure.
Yeah, that's important. I will also come to you in just a short while, because there's something that's been happening. I think a lot of residents have also been reporting some rather strong winds, and I think we've seen that. But we'll come to that in a moment. And it's interesting, of course, that you mentioned that the floods is also a result of our poor infrastructure. Just as we talk about famine and drought being, a management issue rather than a weather phenomenon. We'll get to that in a minute. Ali Bashir, you're a resident of Wajir. We're seeing floods in places like that and in Garissa as well. What's been the effect on the communities in which you work and live?
The rains have been pounding northern Kenya for the last few days, and I would say they have caused a lot of havoc. To begin with, the transport system has been affected. Garissa-Mandera highway is impassable. Buses have been stuck in the mud. There is even the air travel that people use as a fallback has been affected, because today there was a flight that took off from Nairobi that was supposed to land at the airstrip in Mandera that was turned back to Wajir International Airport. A lot of property has also been lost. Livestock has been lost. There are incidences of children who have been swept by the flood and drowned in the water. Some houses have collapsed. The effects of the rain have been numerous. But the other sad thing is, because of the impassable roads, even emergency help cannot reach people in the villages in far-flung areas. Because the roads are so bad, the county government cannot reach those people. So they are stuck in the water, no help is coming for them, and it's quite, many families are spending the night in the water as we speak, and it's a quite sad situation.
Yes, which, I mean, ironically, in parts of northern Kenya, Ali, rain would be welcome, except, at this point, not to this extent.
Exactly, because we have just come from a long dry spell. We had a long drought where a lot of people, livestock keepers have lost their cattle, their sheep, their camel because of the drought. And then now they're losing their livestock again to the rains. So they are between a rock and a hard place until and unless the roads are fixed and a lot of mega dams are constructed to harvest the rainwater, this problem will continue to happen. And it's not that it started just now, because it has been happening. Now the difference is it is only getting to the media now, and social media is playing a very big role. This is a situation we've been experiencing since I remember, since I was born. From 1997 until today, whenever we have rains, we go through the same challenges. And it's a cycle. So until and unless there are deliberate actions, both the national and the county governments come up with, the situation will keep on recurring.
Yeah, and I'll come back to you for just what some of those intervention measures are. Looks like you're losing cattle, livestock and property when it rains and when it doesn't rain in parts of northern Kenya. I will come back to you, Ali, on just what you think are some of the interventions that should be made by both the national and county governments in that region. But so, Venant, what are some of the experiences that you've been having during this time? What are some of the emergency distress calls that you have been receiving, and how have you been managing a number of the crises that you have had to respond to?
Thank you, Yvonne. As of now, we can say 21 counties have already felt the impacts of the rain one way or the other. But 10 have had significant effects, including deaths, infrastructure, and displacements. So in our Emergency Operations Center, currently we have recorded a total of 5,971 households which have been displaced, which translates to roughly around 33,300 people who have lost their shelter. Most of the distress calls we are receiving are the ones calling for emergency response in terms of life-saving. For example, we are receiving many calls about people who are marooned, people who are stuck, people who are feeling they are going to be carried away, whether in their houses or when they are outside there. So they're really calling for help in terms of getting some services to ensure they save their lives and maybe avoid injuries. And this is across the country, even in some of the non-traditional counties who rarely receive effects of floods. We are seeing a change where they are feeling very severe impacts. For example, like what we saw in Meru yesterday. This is a town which really never feels any significant effects of floods. But yesterday, houses were flooded and vehicles were carried away.
You've talked about, and thank you for giving us those statistics, over 33,000 people displaced.
Yes.
I mean, that's an expensive operation, for the Red Cross. How are you doing in terms of the resources that you require to be able to respond to those who are displaced and what they need, and in terms of just giving them the support to get through this period?
Yes, as an emergency response organization, we usually do continuous hazard mapping, analysis, and setting up some level of preparedness to be able to respond. And this really can just go that far. As at now, we are very much overstretched because we identified some of the high-risk areas and prepositioned some of the materials, especially temporary shelter materials. But the magnitude of which the effects have come now is very much beyond what we have in place, and we are feeling very much overstretched, mainly in terms of the materials.
And we'll talk about what you need and what sort of assistance that people can give, national governments, county governments. We'll come and talk about how you are dealing with them. Henry, from the Kenya Alliance Residents Association, for the first time we had some very specific forecasts from the meteorological department, but yet we still saw some major drama, even if you don't take a look at what happened now. I mean, I think, a few months ago, you'll remember what happened with residents of certain estates outside Nairobi. I believe it was Green Park. I mean, what's been the experience of residents in their homes and those who live in major urban centers?
Actually, the experience has been very devastating because year in, year out, we have a situation where people have to lose property, people have to lose lives because of flooding. And at the end of the day, the people who bear the brunt of this kind of unpreparedness that we have are people within the estate residential areas. So we are having a situation where we are failing to get prepared or failing to plan, even with the information that we get from the meteorological department. And we only rush at the last minute to try and clean up the drainage system and put up mitigation measures. But I think what we need to do is to have a system where we are able to put adequate measures in place that will mitigate against the flooding that we have. And some of this flooding are actually caused by the people who are supposed to play a role in mitigating against them. By that, I mean that you find a situation where developments or construction are built on waterways and even on riparian areas. So what that means is that when we have flooding, then the water must find a place to pass through. And that's the situation that we had even at the Green Park, where the pathway of the river is actually blocked, and now we have the resulting effect being the flooding. So the whole idea is, the whole thing is just about poor planning and lack of unpreparedness when we even have resources that have been allocated to ensure that we are addressing the issue of flooding. So we just need to get serious as a country and as a county to ensure that we are doing the right thing at the right time.
Henry, have we been able to quantify the losses? Have you been able to do that, put together, the cost of the damage to residents, particularly in Nairobi?
We might not give a specific figure, but I can tell you it runs in millions of shillings because if you look at the level of damage to properties and even the losses, even in terms of the loss of time people have to spend to now address the impact of the flooding, it's actually a serious, it has a serious economic impact on the people who are affected and even to the county as a whole. Because now the county government has to take a reactive kind of measure and try to do all sorts of things to address a situation that could have been avoided if we had proper planning in place. So the impact on the country and even on the county is huge, and even on individual residents who are directly affected by the kind of flooding that we see.
And has there been any recourse for those who have suffered damage, those who have lost lives and lost property? Has there been any recourse from the county government, from the national government?
Sadly, no, because when these kind of things happen, what we see is passing of blame games. Nobody wants to take responsibility, and everybody is trying to point a finger at the other. So what we know is that individual resident associations, some of them have taken measures to try and get compensation, but the government, be it at the county and the national level, has not taken responsibility to say that we are going to have some kind of compensation to those who are affected. So that has not happened, and it is something that as resident association we are pursuing to ensure that in these kind of cases where they happen, we have a proper mechanism to identify the people who have been affected and have a means and mechanism of ensuring that they are compensated.
All right, gentlemen, stay with me. We want to take a commercial break. When we come back, we'll start talking about intervention measures, compensation, who should be responsible, and just where is the nexus between getting some very specific weather forecasts to then planning and mitigating that risk that would come with the floods. You're watching The Big Story. Please continue to send me your feedback. The hashtag is The Big Story on social media. I'll be right back.